Hey everyone, in this video, I'm going to be talking about career development in children and youth. So I'm going to separate it into three different areas. So elementary school, middle school, and high school. So that's for the United States, at least, the age ranges in public school or even homeschool, kind of how we differentiate the grade levels. Uh, so just to start with, I just wanted to highlight that career development in children in particular, and it can apply to adolescents as well, is that the key tasks might not even be like specific career focus. So it might not be important to specifically be talking about career information or making it like a strong emphasis on career. Sometimes the tasks at this point are to explore, to be creative, to be curious, to learn how to learn, to get along with others. Like those are all key life skills, but they're also specific skills that are really essential for the career development process. And a lot of times, especially in the early years, we're learning the foundations of those skills. So that might sound obvious just hearing it now, but for practitioners, for counselors, like our role is to help facilitate those skills and to create a climate where those skills can be developed and encouraged and nurtured and supported. And there's a lot of different ways we can do that. So I'm just going to provide a few different examples. So I'm going to start with the elementary years. So yeah, anywhere from starting at about age 5 to anywhere around age 11. So one example that I've actually tried out before with some homeschool youth, well, youth being more on the kid range, so pretty early elementary, was to integrate John Holland's Ryeset codes with play therapy. So, and not really the therapy, but the play, like play therapy principles. So once again, the Ryeset codes, John Holland's, the realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, conventional. So I have another video on that if you need to review what those codes are in John Holland's approach. But so basically what I did is I created different stations, six different like play zones that were all based in that one. So for example, the realistic area, I had toys that were related to hands-on work. So tools might be construction, uh, might be athletic equipment since it's working with hands, working with athletics is high in the realistic code as well. Even like some military or police force type like toys could be relevant for the realistic code. And then I did that for each one. So then investigative, maybe putting like a small like some play scientific, like a little magnifying glass or like a doctor uh hit or something like that. Uh, and yeah, there's some overlap between these codes with other ones, but like so for a doctor, like they have some social characteristics as well. But the core is like being that problem solver, being uh, that analyst of sorts. So yeah, I created different jobs or play zones for the different career interest areas from Holland's approach. Uh, so yeah, there are six zones there, and so the parents came as well as the children, and then I introduced them to each of the zones, kind of what they were, just briefly, obviously, just in a really simple way for the kids who are going to be playing there. But I wanted the parents to be there and to see it too, just so they were aware of, what's going on here. And I had some really, really basic career information. So it might be like, hey, someone who works with tools might, make this amount of money. So then the numbers didn't really matter, and it wasn't about the money, but it was just starting to introduce the kids like, oh, like work that's like this play can mean something later. That was the key task and the key invitation, like, oh, there's more information out there. There's more. So it's just basically like, are they going to remember that? No. Are they going to even remember that the number that was there? I hope not. I hope that wasn't the focal point. But it's more just like there's information I can learn and explore. And the toys were chosen like as best as possible to be thoughtful and like even just looking up the Riot set codes on like own it online and seeing which careers were there could be a guide to like get ideas of which toys could be used for the different play therapy zones. But yeah, so I'd orient the parents and the kids to those areas, and then the kids would just play. They would just naturally gravitate to whichever play zones they wanted. They would shift between the zones. Some kids would just like really briefly go to each of the zones, each of the RISEC play zones, and then it's almost like they're just curious of what was at each one. But then they started to spend more time at maybe one or two. So the idea behind it is this like an evidence-based approach? No, it's just kind of a curious example that I wanted to try out with kids and kind of use the RIASEC codes in a play-based way for kids to help them explore and be curious. Uh, but it allowed for that free expression. Then it allowed the parents to notice, oh, which areas are they naturally gravitating towards? So does that mean that they will want to do a career in that later on and they will be interested in that? No, not necessarily, but it created a context and a climate for them to explore. So once again, I felt like that was developmentally attuned to the needs of that age range, but then it was also meeting, the general needs of exploration and curiosity, and as well as some of the specifics, giving them some specific play-based examples. So the middle school, I'm going to jump to an example there or some thoughts. I have less experience working with middle school youth, so I'm going to lean on the King text for some of the examples here. I really appreciated in the Tang text on page 292 about middle school, career services in middle school. It states that the importance of implementing a comprehensive approach to addressing students' academic, career, and personal/social needs cannot be overemphasized. So Tang was basically speaking to the ASCA model, so the American School Counseling Association model that emphasizes the academic development of students, the career development of students, and then the social emotional learning and development of students. So all of these go together. All of these tasks are the life career, in my conceptualization at least. So the school counselor, I think this applies really well to school counseling. Obviously, that they're tasked with addressing those three different areas. But I think Tang is basically saying that as we holistically address students, comprehensively address them in these different areas, we're aiding them in their life career development. Uh, Ting stated that youth might start to be like ready and available, or I guess available is not the right word, but ready and able to utilize career assessments. I'm kind of on the fence on that. I think it'd really have to be like I'd have to think about the youth that are using it because I wouldn't want youth to already start to think that like, oh, career assessments is how I explore from this point on. It would need to be really clearly understood that it's not the end all be all. Uh, but yeah, they could start to have some relevance as youth are developing more. They're maturing a bit more. They're in the transition phase. Many of them of puberty of getting more cognitive complexity, slowly but surely. But yeah, so assessments might have some relevance for that age. But I think what I more resonated with and would recommend is more of an arts and play based approach, even with youth that are kind of in that middle school age range. And what I really like from the Tang text is Tang talked about maybe collaborating with teachers. So, and that could be homeschool or public school. So, for example, Tang brought up like maybe there's a collaboration between a school counselor with an English teacher. And so there's a writing project on career exploration and emerging interests. So they're learning the English skills of how to structure and write a paper, how to communicate their positions, but they're also exploring career. So that could be once again a partnership to where the teacher and the school counselor could get together and kind of share their expertise and their lens to merge together to help students. I think also maybe even an art teacher could be in collaboration with with a school counselor. Might be interesting to just do like some sort of art-based approach of envisioning your future self. Maybe through like painting or clay or whatever the students want to do, like maybe they could do like around three different visions of their future self to say like I think the reason why I would recommend three at least is to help them understand that like we're in flux. We don't have to be just one thing. Sometimes I think the adults want the children to like choose one thing, And that's not really realistic. As you know, adults, we're often shifting and morphing our sense of self and then applying it in different ways in a career. So allowing students to envision their future self, including their career. And maybe it's like, hey, your future self, it can include whatever you want it to be, but it also needs to include the work that you might be doing in at least three different ways. So yeah, they could represent that artistically. So just a few examples of that collaboration with teachers that could do, it could be a group format, so meeting the needs of more students, but then also, meeting a specific content area for their academics, but then meeting that larger career-based uh, task for school counselors. Okay, last area. So high school. So the high school youth tend to feel the weight, or at least many do in this age range of, okay, the like my future's looming. My independence might be feeling like, okay, like it's coming, that I need to start to make some major life decisions. Uh, and so there can be various responses to that. Some teens are going to be really ready and excited for that. Others are going to not want to think about it, not want to be present with those decisions. But I'm going to create another video on this to go in more depth, but I'll just give a small snapshot. So what I've done with high school youth up to this point, just as an example, is I've taught a career development course to homeschool youth. And I created a model of career development that's based in life purpose. So I believe that, career can be and often ultimately is about finding life meaning, that we apply our sense of purpose and meaning in life to a career. And that doesn't mean that it has to be like the source of all meaning, but it's at least a small piece of it. Or even if we're just doing a job for money, that's what we have to do. But then it's creating a context for our overarching life we can survive, we can, find meaning in other life roles. And that work role is supporting that possibility. So, anyways, that's just kind of how I conceptualize the career development process, that it's infused with our sense of meaning and purpose. So I developed a model of life purpose development that then is applied to career. So, for example, the model involves exploring values, what's most important to you, sources of energy, what gives us energy, what brings interest, what kind of brings us into flow states. Also, suffering is a part of the model. That how can a career alleviate suffering or solve important problems in the world? And then even just like, who am I? Like, what's my what natural gifts or even challenges do I have, just from a biological lens, that I was kind of placed in like a life situation where some things come more naturally to me and others don't. So we talk about that biological inheritance, or even that biological legacy that we're receiving from our predecessors. Then also a social legacy, that we're influenced by family, by culture, by our community. So how does that impact our sense of meaning and purpose? And then even for some people, like a spiritual legacy that can include religion, and it can be a-religious, but kind of connecting to what's most sacred and important in our lives. And then the last one is this holism. How can I holistically consider my life, to where the various life roles that I play merge together in a balanced way that are meaningful to me? So that's kind of the model in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it, but those are some of the key pieces. So I taught a career course where basically I'd go through one class period was on values. So it was with homeschool youth, about 12 homeschool youth. So it was very interactive. So I'd maybe introduce the topic for only like about 5 minutes, but then with values, we did a values card sort, or we did, a values auction where students had to like bid for certain values and almost like compete with each other, like outbid each other to be able to get that value. And it kind of showed them which ones were most important to them. So yeah, very experiential was the goal. So I did that with each of the topics. So with energy, we talked about John Holland's interest. We talked about flow states. We spent time reading, discussing it, but then trying to do some sort of interactive experience with each one. Uh, so yeah, that's an example of a career course. And then I've done that on the individual level, just working one-on-one with high school students, like having them read a little bit about one of these areas of the life purpose model that I developed, and then following up just with a conversation to talk about how it applies to them, what it means to them, and talk about, ways to act on that to move towards a career in a meaningful way. So yeah, those are the three different age ranges and developmental levels that I wanted to talk about, of like how to apply and encourage career development for youth. And I think it's super important as well to think about the impact of culture on career experiences at these various age ranges. There's going to be family influence, cultural factors, community based. So we kind of have to help students recognize these cultural influences, or at least we have to be aware of them to kind of help think about how to support students. Uh, so, for example, one quick example before I end is like college going culture. A lot of high schools have this college going culture about them, that it's like prized to go to college. But some students don't resonate with that. They don't want to go to college, or maybe they're not even sure what they want, but they just choose to go to college because that's the culture that they're placed in a high school setting. But really, maybe a more trade-based approach would be more fitting and more meaningful to them, and the kind of fitting for the life domain and the interests that they have. Maybe it's much more of a realistic interest. They want to work hands-on, maybe as a plumber or as a welder, whatever. So sometimes these well-intentioned cultural influences can entrap youth if they don't have time to make sense of themselves, themselves, and be able to differentiate from the cultural messages if they need to. So just a few, just thoughts to prime your brain to integrate cultural messaging and influences into the youth development process. So there's a few examples and thoughts on these different areas. So I'd be happy to hear from you and chat further.